Hello, and welcome to Fresh Blood, a podcast about killing it in the age of ageism, where we prove that new blood does not necessarily equal young blood. Here to discuss what it takes to have continued success through life, I'll be your host, Jolie Downs. With over 20 years of executive recruiting experience, I've learned how much we can grow and be inspired by other people's stories. I'm excited to share that with you here on Fresh Blood. Thank you for joining us today on Fresh Blood. Today we are speaking with John Vespasian. He is the author of 11 books about rational living. He has turned his international background and his personal interest in history into a breed of personal development books that emphasize rationality, resilience, and learning from real-life examples. His latest book was recently published, Asymmetry, the shortcut to success when success seems impossible. John, thank you so much for joining us on Fresh Blood. Please tell us a little bit more about your path to becoming a published author. I'd love to hear how you ended up becoming a writer and then how you found success in this field.
It's a very weird story, I have to say, because the reason why I started to write, it was now 11 years ago, was out of pure frustration. I have to say that I'm a voracious reader in areas I like, history, personal development, psychology, marketing, personal finance. So I read a lot. And at a certain point, I could not find the kind of books I wanted to read, especially on personal development. I wanted to find books that are very practical, very factual, very low key. I'm not so much in favor of this positive thinking fashion we have now. So I started to write the kind of books I could not find. And I have been doing now this for 11 years. My books are unusual in the sense that they reflect my passion for history, my passion for personal development. So what I try to do in each book is to go through really dozens and dozens of biographies of different people in different centuries, different countries, different professions, to try to extract practical lessons that we can use today in the 21st century. So this is what I've been doing for the last 11 years. And I have to tell you, it's hard to write. When you write more and more, it gets easier. It's always a challenge to develop every new book.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. How long did it take you to write your first book?
My first book took me 4 weeks to write because I took a holiday. Okay, I want to write this book. I took 4 weeks and I was writing like 10 hours a day. And after 4 weeks, it was ready. It was the first draft. And then it took me like 6 months to edit. Because it was so crappy and I made so many mistakes. But to produce the first draft, I'm fairly quick. What takes me forever is the editing sometimes I have to edit the book 4 or 5 times until it's really consistent, until it's easy to read. And this is what it is. I'm getting better as I write more books, but still editing for me is the key aspect. It's very, very easy to write crap, but to have a book that people would like to read, I think it takes, at least for me, it takes a lot of editing.
Completely agree. And I love that this was born through frustration, that you found frustration and then you did something about it and filled that hole that you weren't able to find other people filling. So I'm curious because you mentioned that you don't like this positive thinking that's so fluid in so many of these books. What do you find is a constant theme as opposed to positive thinking that appeals to you?
Yeah, well, I call the thread that goes through the books, I call it rational living, which is something I want to make very different to positive thinking. Because what I try to do is to go through biographies and to try to extract lessons that anybody can implement without being super positive, super enthusiastic, super energetic. Because most people aren't, and particularly I'm not. And I want to extract lessons that people can implement even if they're going through a difficult period. It's very difficult to be positive, to be enthusiastic when you're facing adversity. I try to draw lessons that anybody can implement without being overly extrovert, without being super enthusiastic. Maybe in the US, people tend to be, at least from where I perceive, more outgoing and enthusiastic. It's not the case in every culture. And I try to stay away from this extreme positive thinking because for many people, it just doesn't work. It takes too much energy. And when people are depressed or when people have problems, they don't want to use the energy they have just to be enthusiastic. They want to solve their problems.
No, that's really interesting. And you're so right. We all have different mindsets. We all have different ways of living and thinking. And it is hard for certain people to just, paste on the super positive, enthusiastic type of personality. So that's incredibly valuable. And I'm fascinated. As for you, what did you do before you became a writer?
I have different sources of income. I've been working for many years in international commercial projects. I'm also a very active investor, already in I don't know how many countries, 70 countries around the world. I invest in the stock market already for 20 years. So I have different sources of income. Writing is one of them, not necessarily the most profitable, at least in the short term. But, when you write books, they generate income in other ways because then you get invitations to give lectures, to give seminars. So you get all kind of income sources that are not directly coming from the sales of the books. So basically, when you write books, especially if you write one after the other, you get a reputation in a certain niche, and then you can draw income from different activities. So for me, it's a long-term project. I still want to write many, many books. I have material for writing many books. I have the motivation. I'm just get frustrated that I'm so slow. And I think I can only write one book per year. And I would like to write one book every 3 months or even every week. But it takes what it takes. I mean, I cannot write better. I cannot write faster. It takes me a lot of hours to get a book into a state that I say, okay, now it's pretty good. But when you read the first draft, it always looks horrible to me.
Yes. Well, and that's an important lesson because a lot of people after, writing a first draft and reading it might give up in that moment, reading it and realizing it's not that great. It is all about the editing and the shining and making it that perfect specimen at the end, which I love that you're putting out a quality product, John. So, so what would you say has been the path to your success?
My career is based on my interest. Since I was a teenager, I developed an interest in foreign languages, which for Americans is very weird because you live in such a large country, everybody speaks English, or at least half of the population speaks English. And then you don't develop this interest in foreign languages because, most Americans never go out of the US, so what's the point? Maybe they go to Mexico for a couple of weeks, but that's it. But in Europe, the countries are very small. For Americans, it's always a surprise that you can cross a whole country in a couple of hours with a car. And unless you know different languages, it's very difficult to move around. You cannot really go and work in Germany or to work in Belgium or in France if you don't speak the language. And since I realized at a relatively young age that I wanted to move to different countries, I wanted to see the world, I really spent a lot of time learning languages. And at the beginning, it was quite hard. But then as you learn more languages, you become, I think, more, how can I say, you just get it faster because you are building on something that you already know. And it's very difficult to explain with someone who doesn't have the experience. But this, I don't know, you know mathematics and you study physics, then you know already half of the story because you are building on something you already know. So once you learn English, it's another step. You learn German, you learn French, or you learn whatever. I think for Americans, they really underrate the importance of speaking another language, even if you want a second language. But then you can go to another 50 countries and you can travel very easily. You can live there. Many Americans would like to retire, maybe in Costa Rica, maybe in Peru. If you don't speak Spanish, it's really not so comfortable. So if someone is thinking of a second career or is thinking of expanding his possibilities to widen his employment opportunities or his business opportunities, to learn a second language is super inexpensive. And most people have a very unrealistic idea what it takes. I mean, it takes nothing. It takes just 15 minutes a day. You have to be persistent, but all the materials you can get for free nowadays. And I think is one of the best investments you can do if you want to open more opportunities, because otherwise you're stuck in your own country. Today, the situation might be good, but maybe in 5 years, the situation is not so good and you want to move around. These 5 years, if you spend 15 minutes a day, you could already speak another language and you can easily move somewhere else. So I think people should get the idea that it's not a luxury. If you want to have choices, especially when you're in your 40s or your 50s, to learn the second language, to know a second language or even a third language, will give you opportunities that otherwise you would not even see because you cannot really look into it.
Oh, it's so great. You are so right. Every time I travel to Europe, I feel uneducated because of my lack of language knowledge. And almost every person I come across speaks at least three, if not more. How many languages do you speak?
I'm learning now Russian, which is a different level of difficulty, I have to say. But I hope in 2 years to be able to speak fluently with mistakes because it's quite complex. But I mean, you have to realize, I mean, I take about now 56. So basically, I'm learning a language per decade. So it's not that I'm a genius. It's just that I try to use the opportunities to learn. And it's just, it's a bit like going to the gym. Unless you go every day or you go every couple of days here and there and you spend half an hour, it's very difficult actually to develop any kind of strength or any kind of muscle. And to learn languages, I think it's the same. I mean, you have to put in this 10 minutes, 15 minutes every day, and then it's very easy, but you have to find these 10 minutes.
I love it. John, you have inspired me. I'm making a commitment right now. I'm going to learn a language a decade. I think that is brilliant. It's happening. Thank you. And now, can you tell me about, because you've written a lot of books. It sounds like you've done quite a bit in your life with investing and a lot of different things. What has been your greatest success and what did you learn from it?
Well, my greatest success is that I can put together fairly complex books without a lot of effort. And I have to tell you, it's something that came naturally. It's not that I started one day and said, oh, I'm going to write one book per year. What happens is I work backwards. And it means that I read a lot. I read all kind of stuff, blogs, magazines, newspapers, whatever. And I always taking notes. So I've been taking notes like forever. And I have a lot of notes about things that I find interesting. And when I want to put together a new book, I just go back to my notes and then I put together a new book. So it's not the question. I don't need to make 2 years of research because I already know what I want to say. So this is because I'm doing something that is very close to my interest. I'm not writing books about dogs. I mean, I don't care much about dogs, but I guess if you want to write about dogs and you don't know anything, you have to do a lot of research about what they eat and the dog health and whatever. And I work backwards. First, I do something that I find interesting. I find fascinating to read biographies, to read history, to read finance. And then I write the books about things I already know.
I love it. And that's a great way to look at it. Work backwards. Start with your passion, fill yourself up with that and then work backwards on how you can make that work for you. It's great. Now, let's flip it. What about a time you failed or had a very big obstacle, struggle, and overcame it? What did you learn from it?
Well, I mean, I have failed so many times, I cannot even tell you. I mean, not only losing money in the stock market, losing jobs, losing different personal relationships, friends. I mean, I've made such a huge amount of mistakes. But I have to tell you, one of the principles that I really underline in my books is that you have to look at your life, at your choices, at your problems in terms of a lifetime. So most people are going to live nowadays 90 years, 95 years, maybe even longer. So when I look at my failures, my mistakes, and in different areas, I can tell that in the short term, it is natural to become sad, to become angry, to become disappointed. But when you look at your mistakes, at your failures, from the perspective of a lifetime, and I tell myself, oh, I'm going to live this 90 years, 95 years, or even longer perhaps, then these mistakes and these failures, they vanish because they are so negligible. So, I mean, they will not stop me in the long term from becoming super successful. So you have to look at this kind of adversities in the right perspective. I really underline this in my books with many examples of people who lost their jobs, people who lost their careers, people who lost their health. And eventually, after a couple of years, the whole story is forgotten because they found a solution and then they move on. And this is a message that I find super important. You have to look at things from the perspective of a lifetime. Otherwise, it's very easy to go crazy.
Yes, isn't that true? Oh, it's so true. And from those stories, what did you find was something that helped people during those times of transition? Like if they lost the job and were struggling, or had an issue with their family or issue with health and were in that struggle, was there something that people did or applied that helped them get through?
Yes. Let me just focus for a second on the latest book. The title is Asymmetry. And the thesis of the book is that when you're facing any kind of adversity or any kind of health problem, a financial problem, most of the time the solution is not symmetric, it's not linear. This is, I don't know, an example. If you have a headache and you say, okay, I have to take something for my headache, most of the time the reason for the headache is not in your head, or the reason for losing your job is not in the job. It's a different thing. It's something which is not symmetric. It's not easy to see. And when people, they lose the job and they cannot find another job, they blame the economy, they blame their employer. But if you look at the whole situation from a wider point of view, you see that the problem is not that they lost the job. The problem is that they were very vulnerable in the first place because they have not developed additional skills, because they didn't keep their opportunities open. They didn't look at the market. So eventually they became very vulnerable. And this is a different perspective. It's not just say, oh, I lost a job. I mean, what a crappy situation. What I'm going to do now? No. And what I try to do in this book is to open the eyes of the readers to these asymmetric relationships that you find very often in different careers, in different countries, in different professions, and showing how people eventually become successful if they adopt this perspective. The idea that you get successful in a very linear way, and then you say I don't know, you are 5 years old, and then you say I want to be the CEO of General Electric, and then you go through this path and you take steps. That is complete nonsense, a pure Hollywood movie. 99% of successful people, they follow asymmetric careers. They make mistakes, they find obstacles, and then they take an asymmetric approach to circumvent the problem. And this is what I've done in the book. I put together, I think, about 30 biographies of different people showing how to apply this principle.
That's fantastic. That's incredibly helpful too. Now, are there any habits that you have formed that have helped you be successful in continuously writing these books and making them successful books?
I have many little habits that I think contribute to, at least to preventing problems. I just mentioned a few of them. For instance, one of my habits is to read every day the news. I use RSS, which is an internet newsreader, and you can get the headlines of newspapers, blogs in almost in real time. And you can go through really dozens and dozens of information sources very quickly. Within 10 minutes, you can read the headlines of maybe 50 newspapers. And I find this very useful. I do this every day in the morning or in the evening. I spend these 10 minutes because it gives me a lot of ideas, not only for investment, but also about whether I should buy a house here, or I should move to a different country, or I should do something else. Because you see the trends before they actually occur. Because when you use different sources of information, they go directly into my telephone. I just have to click the RSS reader, and then I get all these headlines. From time to time, I read a whole article, but most of the time, I just read the headlines from different countries and different newspapers. And this, I find it a very good habit. I think people spend too much time watching television, which is very slow because, you can watch TV for an hour, but then you only get 2 or 3 new items because TV is very, very slow. I think if you get a habit of reading these headlines on the phone from different sources, linked to your profession or linked to your interest, you will detect many, many opportunities that otherwise you will not see.
Oh, yeah. No, that's so many of us get our information from very narrow view sources as well. I mean, too much of the United States population probably gets most of their news from the social media, which is not great. So I love this suggestion, and I love the suggestion of being able to get the headlines from all around the world and be able to get that well-rounded viewpoint. So that has helped you with your investments and purchases in the past, it sounds like. So what about, let's say, before we wrap this up, if there was a piece of advice, one piece of advice that you would give listeners that you feel would make the biggest impact into helping them reach their own success, what would that be?
Well, I could talk about this for hours and hours, but just to give you a couple of ideas. One of the characteristics you see in successful people, at least from the biographies I've studied, and really I studied hundreds of them, is that they identify very well what they know and what they don't know. And this is something that, it seems like very simple, but it is not. I mean, it happens very often that people become very frustrated because they try to do something and they don't know how to do it, or they try to enter a new field, or they try to move to a new city, and then it doesn't work. And this is because when you look at successful people, you see that they develop a certain set of skills, or they develop a certain knowledge or a certain interest for a lifetime, sometimes for 20 years. And then they try to find a way to make money in that area. And occasionally they would expand, but usually very slowly, because they to expand your knowledge really takes time. And on the contrary, people who become a total disaster because they lose everything, they destroy their lives, they improvise. Improvisation, I think, is the cardinal sin when it comes to personal development, because you tend to make a lot of mistakes out of, I think, arrogance, because nobody wants to recognize that I don't know, I just don't know how to do this. This is very dangerous. So I would recommend people to really understand themselves, to say, okay, I'm good at doing this. This is something I like. I like to live in this country, or I like to live in this weather, or I like to meet this kind of people. I mean, know yourself, know what you like, because then you can build your life around your skills or your strengths. But do not improvise, because today in this culture of positive thinking, people are very foolishly pushed to improvise, to do things without thinking, to make stupid investments, and they lose everything. And this is very sad. But unless you look at history, you will learn the lesson very painfully.
Oh, yes. No, that's a very good piece of advice. You said you had a couple. Was there another one in there? Because that was big.
Yes, I can give you another one. And this is that you have to be willing to stop chasing too many rabbits. For instance, in this latest book, in Asymmetry, one of the biographies I present is the one from Mozart, who was a very talented musician, composer. But in the end, he died very young, and he died very poor. And I found the story very intriguing. I said, wow, how is it possible that such a genius didn't make money? He was always running away from creditors. He was working 18 hours a day for decades. I mean, it's a complete disaster. And the answer is that Mozart was not willing to quit anything. He did everything he could to make money, but he did stupid things. I mean, he would spend his time teaching piano lessons for peanuts. Then he would write a piece of music for a burial. He would get, I don't know, a few $100, and then another one. So in the end, he was working for peanuts. He could have made a fortune very easily by concentrating on the niche of the market, the part of the market that was the big business in the 18th century, was opera. Mozart wrote a few operas, but he didn't realize that he had to concentrate on doing operas and actually stop all the rest. He didn't like to write operas, and I have to tell you, this is very psychologically is very illustrating, because he thought that he had to play himself. He had to perform himself. He had to really show that he was a great performer, but it was stupid, because you could not make money in the 18th century playing piano. You could make a lot of money writing operas, because it was a big business. You could actually sell licenses around Europe, and you have a good opera like Don Giovanni, you get royalties not only in Vienna, where Mozart lived, they get royalties from Milan, from Paris, from London. And Mozart was too absorbed in his greatness to understand that he had to take a step back, and he had to really stop chasing so many rabbits. He had to concentrate on the only thing that made money. And this is very difficult for people, very difficult for everybody, to stop working 18 hours a day and say, I have no choice. I have no choice. Yes, you have a choice, but you have to take a step back. You have to think, and you have to stop doing everything that is not profitable.
Oh, that's good. That's really good advice too. You're right. And we don't see it unless we take that time to take a step back and evaluate everything. Where is the revenue being generated? Where is the big money that can be made, and where does it make sense to be spending the most of your time? And look at the lessons that you can get all these years later from Mozart. I love it. And I'm super interested in reading more from your books. Thank you so much, John. This was very enlightening. I appreciate your time.
Many thanks, Jolie.
John had some excellent life advice to share with us. I love that his writing career grew because he couldn't find the books he wanted to read. So he went out and wrote them. This is the key to success. Action. Finding that hole and then actually taking the action to fill it. The people that do take action, there's nothing inside of them that makes them any more special than you or me. They just make the decision to do it, and then they do so. You can too. John shared with us that he is not a fan of positive thinking, which is prevalent in our society. So he found a mindset shift that would work for him. Reflecting on the lessons of historical figures and implementing those lessons into his life. I think this is an important message. While I am a huge believer in positive thinking, and I know that you can change your mindset. However, it does take a very concentrated effort. And John is right. There are times in life when making that concentrated effort can feel too much for the human spirit. Sometimes the spirit needs a different nudge to get it where it needs to be. And that's what we need to be paying attention to. The nudges that speak to us in the moment. Regardless of your energy level, regardless if you're an energetic or enthusiastic person or not, there are tools that anyone can use to help face adversity. And those are the lessons that John focuses on in his books. One of the lessons he learned from writing these books is that for success, it's imperative to understand yourself and know what it is that you are good at. You need to know what it is that you like, what it is that you do not like, and you build your life around your skills and your strengths. Once you've done that, you remember to take that good look all around your work and industry and find that sweet spot that plays to your strengths and that of which is most profitable. We can learn from Mozart's mistakes here and make sure that we are not chasing the various rabbits, which, let's be honest, most of us are likely doing. But rather, we should be focusing our efforts on what pushes us the most towards our goals. Another key to John's success, which I think is vital to each and every one of us, is that he reads every day. He looks at the RSS internet news reader and he checks out headlines on the internet and blogs in real time, going through dozens of sources in minutes. He looks at the headlines from different sources around the world, not just in his own country or news outlets that cater to your own echo chamber. He looks at it all. And because of that, he is able to detect opportunities, trends, and investment ideas that most would otherwise not see. This is a very easy habit that we can all adopt into our lives to lead to new ideas and inspiration, let alone to help become a well-informed individual. Let's be honest. A large population of the United States has been living in their own echo chamber for these past years. It's important that we all start opening our eyes to the world. We are all one people. We are all connected. We just happen to have different geography. Successful people know this, and they live their lives with a world view. I loved John's perspective on failures and mistakes. He told us that we have to look at life and our choices in this perspective of a lifetime. When you experience a failure or mistake, it's natural to be sad, angry, or disappointed. But when you look at the long line of your life, these mistakes vanish. They don't stop your long-term success. In fact, sometimes they can be the key to your long-term success. It's the mistakes that provide the richness of experience for you once you get there. Every single successful person in the world has been through large challenges, large losses, and they choose to learn their lessons and move on. You can too. Next time you're beating yourself up for a mistake, remember to take a step back. Know that this will eventually become a blip on your radar screen. Pick yourself up, brush yourself off, ask, what can I learn from this experience? Absorb that lesson and move on. I absolutely loved John's suggestion on how to leverage success in the long term. Learn new languages. John is learning a new language a decade, and I find this incredibly inspiring. Admittedly, Americans are much behind our European counterparts when it comes to languages. Learning new languages widens and opens your career possibilities tremendously. Not only will it give you a career advantage, the personal advantages are incredible. Travel easily, option to live in or retire in another country comfortably, larger ability to connect with others, better decision-making skills, improved memory, increased attention span, increased perceptual sensitivity, increased intelligence, and it boosts your creativity. Also, after learning one language, it's 1,000 times easier to learn another. This is a win-win-win solution for everyone, and it's free. It only takes 15 to 20 minutes of your day, like going to the gym, but easier. And it will add incredible advantages to your life, opening up opportunities you can't even imagine. What I would suggest is taking this idea of a language a decade and magnifying it. What if you created a nightly routine that included 1 hour of a gift to yourself? 20 minutes learning a new language, 20 minutes learning a musical instrument, and 20 minutes of learning a new skill that appeals and fascinates you. Can you imagine the person you would be and the knowledge you would have in 10 years? Let alone 20, 30, 40? Really amazing to imagine. Let's create a Renaissance revolution. I personally am making a commitment to change my routine and add this personal hour to my evenings and life mastery. I welcome you to join me. Until next time. Thank you for spending time with us on Fresh Blood. If you love this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, or giving us a review. I'm looking forward to connecting with you again on the next episode.